Welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Chris Roberts. Excuse me. Before we start the show, I was told that I do a heck of a lot better job when I have a guest here instead of by myself. And if I do a crappy job by myself, I apologize and I will try to get better. And I welcome any of your constructive criticism if you see me out and about on the street. The reason I just don't have as many guests as I've used in the past is because we've got a number of shows on Channel 8, and Channel 8 is really progressive in getting as many live shows as possible. Here in Keene, there are only so many guests to go around. There's only so many subjects. You got the Bearcat, the courthouse, the new fire station, things going on in the school system. So we just don't want the people to come in and repeat everything over and over again. And so, but I'm now working on more guests, new guests on a little bit more different subjects and topics that would be interest to the people of Keene and Marlboro and the surrounding area. So we're going to try our best. And yeah, it's right. It's pretty tough to talk for 45, 50 minutes by yourself, but I try to get as much information out as possible. So today, April 16th, Boston Marathon Day. Plain and simple, it's 83 degrees outside right now. It could very easily be 85 to 90 degrees down in Boston, which is going to be pretty brutal for a lot of people running, especially since the Boston Marathon laxed its standards. So basically we're in the past where Boston Marathon had some pretty high standards, so people were in pretty good shape. Right now, I think they're going to have like 22 to 25,000 people. So there's, for a lot of people, it's going to be excited to run the marathon, but the question is going to be, would they be healthy enough and trained enough to run the Boston Marathon under these brutal conditions today? I just hope someone, everybody realizes when they reach that point and they can't go anymore, excuse me, they forget about their ego and worry about their health. Me, I'm a little jealous about not running the Boston Marathon. I've done it twice in the past, but I think I'm just too fat right now to run it and out of shape. But you know what? Maybe if I start running and get in shape and lose the weight, who knows? Okay. And a subject, I was talking to a few people the other day concerning doctors and Medicare patients, and the people questioned my facts on it, and they said, nope, it's not happening, and this is what happens sometimes. The facts from your perspective may be completely factual. It may, just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it may be happening to someone else. And in sometimes, when it's not happening to us, we just make the assumption that it cannot be happening to other people. And the title, it was by Richard Wolff from the USA Today, and this was June 2010. Doctors limit new Medicare patients. It's the American Academy of Family Physicians says 13% of the respondents did not participate in Medicare last year, up from 8% in 2008 and 6% in 2004. So from the time frame from 2004 to 2008, the number of doctors not participating in Medicare went up 33%. The number of doctors from 2009 to 2010, over 50% of it, went another increase of 15%. The American Orthopedic Association says 15% of its members do not participate in Medicare, and 19% will not accept new Medicare patients. Again, it says if the cut is not reversed, it said the numbers will double. So here's again, basically we're saying is in the very near future, the American Orthopedic Association predicting that 30% of its members will not participate in Medicare, and of the ones that do participate in Medicare, 40% will not accept new Medicare patients. The American Medical Association says 17% of more than 9,000 doctors surveyed restrict the number of Medicare patients in their practice. Among primary care physicians, the rate is 31%. Physicians, I'm saying, I can't afford to keep losing money. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services say 97% of doctors accept Medicare. The agency doesn't know how many have refused to take new Medicare patients. And so Deputy Administrator Jonathan Bloom said Medicare beneficiaries have good access to physicians' service. We do have concerns about access to primary care physicians. Well, primary care, there's a reason why they call primary care. You should be able to go and see your doctor. If you get to see a primary care doctor, you get to prevent serious problems. And so states that are having problems. In Illinois, 18% of doctors restrict the number of Medicare patients in their practice, according to the Medical Society survey. In North Carolina, 117 doctors opt out of Medicare between January and June of 2010, said the State Medical Society. In New York, about 1,100 doctors have left Medicare care. Even the Medical Society president isn't taking new Medicare patients. I'm making a statement, says Mr. McCormick, a New York City dermatologist. Many physicians are readily being forced out of private practice. Florida has the highest percentage of Medicare patients, and most doctors can't afford to leave the program, but the level of frustration has been higher this year than I've ever seen before, said Mrs. McMullen of the Florida Medical Association. So there are a lot of people that are in the Medicare system. They have a primary care doctor, and that doctor is pretty important. The problem is for the people who are 64, getting ready to turn 65, going on Medicare, trying to find a doctor that will accept Medicare. And so if you look at Medicare, now look at Medicaid, and I would presume to look at it, if a lot of doctors are not taking Medicare, very few are going to be, even less are going to be taking Medicaid. So again, this is where I got my information, and even at the State House and other researchers, more and more doctors are opting out of the Medicare and Medicaid system, which doesn't bode well for our elderly as they get ready to retire. Or in some cases, the other side is the elderly who are retired and their doctor retires and they're not picked up by a new primary care physician. But it also says it's a very negative impact on the poor who have to rely on Medicaid and the disabled that get Medicaid and or Medicare. Okay. And so another part is everybody's talking about class warfare. This tax, someone isn't paying enough tax, someone should be paying more tax. It's really strange is because what is really class warfare? The average American pays about 8% in federal income tax. And I'm not counting Social Security and Medicaid because one is an insurance program and one is a retirement program. You're getting something back, but on the average, it's about 8%. And you could pay 25% on the last dollar you earned, but when you average it all out, you could come up with about 8 to 10% for the average American. If you look at former Governor Romney, he pays about 14%. You look at President Obama and his wife, they pay about 20%. And if they did not have high deductions by donating to charities and stuff, they would pay even less. That's the problem in the tax system. The people who earn money pay more taxes. The people who have money that earns money pays less taxes. One is wages and one is income, and a lot of time people get it mixed up. Because, for example, the president only earns $400,000 as the president, but him and his wife almost earned $800,000, so that almost additional $400,000 could be taxed at a much lower rate, for example, say the property gains tax. But as we get back to the class warfare, and the war that's really coming on is not class warfare, it's going to be the war between the young and the war between the retired. And people go, no, no. Well, we have a group of baby boomers. I'm one of them, plain and simple. We created a $16 trillion deficit. We don't want any changes going forward, whether it's in Social Security, Medicare, or any of those items. Well, without changes, we're not going to be able to afford it, so we have to keep increasing our debt. And who's going to have to pay for that? That is going to be the young, the ones who graduate out of college and can't get a job, the people in their 20s and their 30s. And the question is, what's going to happen? Are they going to revolt? Are they just going to refuse to pay? And one of the things, if they refuse to pay, what happens? And being in a democracy or republic, what happens if the young of America says, we had enough of Congress? Congress is made up of a lot of old white men and white women and a few minorities, and they don't understand us. What happens if they go and run and say, I want to take over the State House, I want to take over Congress? And if that happens, then it's going to be a traumatic shift one way. And I got an article, The Old Get Richer, the Young Get Poorer. It's from Smart Money magazine. And it says, the old have gotten wealthier, while the young have become poorer. That's a conclusion of the old prosper related to the young, a recent report by economists and researchers at the Pew Research Center. It documented a raising age gap, as well as economic well-being. The author compared households headed by adults over 65 to those headed by young adults younger than 35. They examined data over time, particularly from 1967, 1984 to 2005 and 2009, 2010. The comparison between 2009 and 2010 illustrates the impact of the Great Recession. From 1984 to 2009, the median household income of older households 65 and over increased by 42%, while younger households under the age of 35 decreased by 68%. Okay, if you're 65 and over on the average, your household, the medium household, 50% above, 50% below, your net worth went up 42%. For the young 35 and below, your net worth went down to dropped by 68%. The gap in wealth between older and younger households widened over time. In 1984, the median net worth of older households was $108,000 higher than the younger households. Again, if I was at 65, my value of my household was $108,000 higher than someone 35 and younger. By 2010, the median net worth of older household increased to $166,000. So, basically, the average household is now worth $60,000 more than the younger household. That's the largest gap in the 25 years that the United States government is collecting data. And for the sake of argument, all figures are expressed in constant 2010 dollars. In younger household, median adjusted annual income rose from $38,000 in 1967 to $49,000 in 2010, basically $11,000. Again, in 2010 dollars. So again, with people arguing, so that's 33 over a 40-year period. The medium, again, 50 above, 50 below. Again, over a 43-year period, the amount increase went for 35 and younger went from 38,000 to 49,000. Basically 11,000 increase over 43 years. Not much of an increase, and I'm willing to bet, oh, it's constant, so $2,010. But at the same time, income from older house rate rose by 109%, going from $20,000 to $44,000. And in 1967, there was an $18,000 gap. In 2010, there's less than a $6,000 gap. And I'm pretty sure there ain't too many kids running around in houses over 65,000, unless there was some of those guys who were really stupid and they decided, well, I can't call them stupid, but maybe used a little bit poor judgment and decided to have kids in their late 40s or early 50s. There's a few of those. But the thing is, you can look at it, a two-person household over 65, they're earning about $43,000. While if you're under 35 with married 2 kids, you're only earning about $6,000 more. So when you put in child care, the extra car, the extra expenses, so when actually the actual disposable income for a family under 35 is much less than the disposable income of over 65. From 2005 to 2009, part of the recession, the net worth for older households declined by 6%, while the younger households declined by 55%. Meanwhile, the adjusted median income of the older households rose 8%, while the younger households experienced a 4% drop. And so the labor market trends at work too. Due to recession, today's young have experienced a delayed entry into the labor market, but older adults are staying in the job longer. Right now, in 2010, 2011, 16% of the people 65 and older are employed. That's versus 10% in 1985. And so the elderly, or elderly, you're not elderly at 65, they have Social Security and they have a steady income. So even if they lose the extra job, they still have a steady income. But if they want to increase the income, they can go get a job. A growing number, the author notes, are college graduate of the people compared to the younger counterparts. The report says, documents hopeful signs for younger American. A growing number, the author says, are college graduates, and college graduates have been found to confer a significant financial payoff over the course of a lifetime. But that goes to the question, over the lifetime, but what happens if you're 25, 26, 27, working, you got college degree, you got $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in college debt, and you may be living at home with your parents, you may be only getting $12 to $13 an hour, not having enough money to pay off your college debts. So with interest, they could be increasing. You could be getting penalties because you're not paying it off in time. And so if you lose 4, 5, 6 productive years, how does that pay off over the lifetime? Another one from Market Watch, are baby boomers taking all the jobs? And it goes, do you know, in the first time in our history, people in their late 60s are more likely to have a job than teenagers are. And the growth rate had been very uneven since 2009, with the largest growth in the 50 to 70 age group and among men. And so we're talking about college students having to pay more money for college, to take more loans and get deeper in debt. But I worked while I was in college. I worked before college to save money. A lot of kids used to do that. But if the jobs are not there, how can they earn money to help pay for college? So if you go to Walmart, you go to Target, you go to a number of these places, how many teenage kids do you see working? You can go to McDonald's and you can go to Wendy's. It's more and more middle-aged and elderly people working at these places. Home Depot is no different. So where do the kids get the job experience, the work experience, the experience of having to be dependable and to make decisions? The way the economy is going, they're losing that opportunity. The employment among older folks, 55 and older, grew 2.9 million. This group has about a third of the adult population, but account for roughly 70% of the employment growth over the past 27 months. At the same time, the number of young employments under 25 grew by 815,000. Teenage employment actually declined, and the employment in the prime working age grew by only 437,000 jobs. More of the baby boomers are staying on a job because they're healthy enough to keep working. They like working. Further, many of them desperately need the money. They lost their retirement nest egg when the housing market collapsed and the stock market stalled. Few of them can rely on defined benefit plans, and most of them must rely on their own savings to fund retirement. For the first time in our history, people in their late 60s are more likely to be working than teenagers are. People nearing retirement are also staying on the job long now that the retirement savings have been washed away. The researchers from the Chicago Fed Reserve figured a year ago the loss of wealth suffered by the nearly retiring increased their participation in the labor force by almost 3%. That means an extra 500,000 people are still punching the clock every day instead of enjoying retirement. That's 500,000 of jobs that younger people could have, but they don't. The author of the article says, well, these numbers are not really that accurate, because you can go and say, hey, what about the people who are 54? So if the people who are 54 turn 55, so that may distort, and they still have a job, they may distort that. But the question is, if it's saying of the 2.9 million new jobs created, this was the growth. Yeah, you can maybe say, I could be 54, I'll lose my job and go get another job at 55, and I would count into that. Yep, but you could. And so that would be a question, and that's playing with statistics. And when he gets together from December 2009 to December 2011, during that 24 months, employment increased by 2.82 billion, with 1.85 million added into the 55 to 70 age group. Employment among young adults increased by 691,000, while the employment in the prime working age of 25 to 54 increased by just 52,000. Okay, so again, when the statistics saying his employment increased by 2.85 million and 1.85 million added to the 55 to 70 group, or almost 70% of that total, okay, if the author wanted to argue that a great majority of that 1.85 million were from the 54 that just happened to move on, then that would be distorted, because if 500,000 were 54 and moved on, they would increase that age group, but that would mean there would have to be 500,000 additional jobs for younger people. So if younger employment increased, say, by 700,000 and prime working age increased by 52,000, so basically that's 750,000 of the people. And so the question is, where did the other 2.1 million come from? If 1.85 million added to the group were 55 to 70, okay, there's the question, there's about 300,000 that's not accountable for. And so basically that's how I'm playing with the numbers, but no matter what you look at it, more people 55 to 70 are working. Part of saying that 300 group, 300,000 is people over 70. There are more people over 70 that are working. I know numerous people here in Keene. Some are in their 70s, some are here in their 80s, who are still working. And in the past, they wouldn't be working, but they're healthy enough to work. Excuse me. Some of them need the money, so they're still working. It says, and it finishes up, many young people are not getting the opportunity they need to find a place in this world and are beginning to build and to begin building their lives. While many of them may be getting valuable skills in school, they're not starting families or buying homes or getting the work experience they need to move into more responsible jobs that pay more. The same thing happened to the generation that came of age in the 1930s. They put their lives on hold for years, and we are still living with their legacy, the baby boomers who are now clinging to their jobs. And so, again, plain and simple, we're having it right now. A lot of people in their 20s, their 30s, they're not getting married because they can't afford to get married. Marriage is one of the all-time lows. They're not getting good jobs. They're not having children. They're not buying houses. So again, by not getting married, not having children, they're not creating new households, which go out and buy new cars, new furniture, and stuff, which gets the economy going. But when I read these two articles, and there's a bunch of other articles out there, it isn't class warfare we need to be worrying about. It's going to be the old against the young. And that could be a very dangerous war to happen. And to me, I think we as politicians, we need to get together and come up with a plan, a solution, so we don't do this. And I think many of us older politicians are just selfish. We've lived the good life for a long time. We've stuck the younger people with the bill, and we just want to get out of this world without having to pay our fair share. And, I don't know if it's going to happen or not. And I know it shouldn't happen, but it's, again, the next revolution may be the younger people getting very active in political arena, just so they can help protect some of their self-interest against this overwhelming deficit that we're going to give them. And like I had said 2 weeks ago when I was talking to Ernie, it doesn't matter what party is elected with their plan. We're planning on adding another $10 trillion onto the deficit by the debt by 2022. So it's not going to be good, but we can still work and get it better. Okay, it's that time of the year. Trying to make some of my travel plans. I had a great time last year. I've got my little life book, 100 places to see in your lifetime in the United States. I've got 44 of the 100. I hope to maybe add 10 or 15 more on to this year. I'm not going to take a big major trip. I'm going to take a number of trips. One, I just took a little small one. I had to go to Fall River. I went to the wake of my track and cross country coach, Mr. Wilcox. He died way too young, 70 years old. Here's one of the individuals that had a positive effect on my life. He saw something in me and he kept pushing me hard. And basically he pushed me and I was able to go to college, came to Keene State, joined the Marine Corps, and so on and so on. And so that was 40 years ago. And it was sorry to see him go. And like I said, he was way too early. And so on my way down and back, I stopped into 6 lighthouses. I've been to all of them before, but I took better pictures and some film. And my next plan is I have a conference to go in North Carolina next month. So I'll be driving down there and take some lighthouses along the way. And one of my major goals this year is to visit as many of the top 20 American art museums and a number of botanical gardens, and and maybe add 40 to 50 lighthouses onto my total. Going to bring my 2 granddaughters down to Georgia to visit their aunt. Then I'll be able to take a swing around the southeast, add Hot Springs National Park to my collection, one of the 3 I haven't been in the continental United States. And so that's part of my plan, still working on it. And I hope as many of you as possible start thinking about enjoying yourself, taking a short vacation. There's plenty of places to visit in New England and the Northeast. And so now I'm going to move on to something extremely serious. It's affecting a lot of people. A lot of people may not even know it's affecting them. And basically, and it may affect them. It may affect their spouse, their children, their grandchildren. And it's Agent Orange. And we all know about Agent Orange in Vietnam. We all know about Agent Orange that was used in the Korea, the DMZ. But that wasn't the only place. And the reason I'm bringing this up is to provide the information to as many veterans as possible. But the part that really irritates is we as a U.S. government have a very poor track record of taking care of our veterans, especially when it's illnesses that was caused by us as the government. The American men and women, veterans, armed service, put their trust in the government. The government told them not to worry about anything, and if anything happened, we would take care of you. We would take care of you. Now, let's look at the American government track record. Look about the hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, Marines, and sailors, and some Air Force people that were involved in the atomic and nuclear bomb testing out in Nevada, out in the Pacific. And as the people started coming up with rare cancers, as they started dying young, as they started having children with serious disabilities and birth defects, we kept telling, as a government, as a people, saying, no big deal, no big deal, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And then as the government went along, as more and more of them died off, as a number of them died horrible deaths, then all of a sudden, it was almost like the bean counters got together and says, you know, this won't cost us that much. The politicians got together and say, you know what, we can make political hay about this and say, okay, let's stop providing medical treatment through the VA to the remaining veterans that were involved with subject to the radiation from these nuclear tests. By then there wasn't too many left. And then just because we said it was okay, no big deal, just prove to us that you were there. And oh yeah, you better not been from L to Z because there was a big fire in St. Louis and your records were destroyed. Yep, you can go to the American Legion or the VFW and put a little blurb in there and say, hey, does anybody remember me? And if you can get 2 or 3 other people to sign a sworn statement, the VA may then take that into consideration. And at the meantime, as the delays were going on, more and more people died, and so less money had to be paid. Same thing with asbestos. Here again, when I was in the Marine Corps, we had asbestos breaks. There was no protection for asbestos breaks and stuff in the 70s. Yes, you were on ship. There was plenty of asbestos. You went on there and you would see the white covering and it would say asbestos. Again, from the early 1900s, we knew asbestos was dangerous. We had people that worked in the shipyard. We had people that were in the Navy. All around, there was asbestos. And we kept saying, nope, nope, nope. And then again, as more of them died with melanoma, is it not melanoma? It begins with an M, died of that lung disease. Then we says, you know what, you have a right to asbestos. We did the same thing with individuals coming back from Vietnam with PTSD, saying, nope, there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with you. We were doing that because they were just average young men and women, mostly men, who got drafted, did not have the ability to get out of the draft. They got drafted, and we were finding ways to get around it. And it took a long time, again, as more and more veterans who served in Vietnam committed suicide, suicide by cop, overdosed on alcohol or drugs. And we just said, couldn't make it. We always found justification for that individual and what they were doing. And now we're finally starting to take care of them, the ones from Vietnam. But the ones from Vietnam, they can see their brothers and sisters from Iraq and Afghanistan, again, getting looked at and overlooked and saying, well, you know, what's a traumatic brain injury, or what's the problem, or the military saying, well, you had a preconditioned psychological disorder. And so if you had a preconditioned psychological disorder, in most cases, we don't have to pay you anything. But wait a minute, if you had a preconditioned psychological order before you came in the military, and if we could have you spend 2-3 years overseas in a combat area, and then you can say, well, you had a psychological disorder before you came in. Wait a minute. No, that's to save money. We've got documentation and emails out there where you've got people who are in the VA saying, well, let's be careful. Let's not give these people a disability rating for PTSD or traumatic brain injury, because when we give them higher percentages, we have to pay money for them. And that is just plain wrong. If we as a country are willing to send our young men and women over there, if we as a country are willing to spend $1.5, $2 trillion for for Iraq and Afghanistan, maybe that's a Freudian slip, or maybe that's a precursor of what's to come, we should be able to spend the money to take care of them, okay, and take care of them the right way. And with the budget deficits and all this other kind of stuff, I fear we will not take care of them. And a recent report stated that there are more veterans, Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, killing themselves last year or so far this year than have been killed in Afghanistan. There's a number of articles in the New York Times and other newspapers and other major news outlets on the web are talking about young men and young women who survived Afghanistan, who survived Iraq, but they can't survive home. And that's a really sad state for our country. The other thing that we've done to young men and women, especially Vietnam one, was Agent Orange. And one report stated up to 71 million liters of Agent Orange and other herbicides was dropped over Vietnam. And for years we said, no big deal, nothing to worry about. Even thought we had pictures and we had examples of service members having blisters, their skin peeling off. We had birth defects, spina bifida, and other ones, younger age of prostate, an increased level of diabetes. And they would go and say, well, that diabetes wasn't caused by Agent Orange. The diabetes was as a result of poor lifestyle. Yes, there are veterans out there who are overweight and obese. And yes, you could argue scientifically that a lot of them have they're diabetics because of their lifestyle. But again, you can't use that as justification to throw away all these other claims for diabetes. Well, if the average guy gets prostate cancer at 55 and veterans who are around Agent Orange get it in their 40s, or if the average person is at a certain age, or they're overweight, or they have this type of diet, get diabetes, then you've got other people who are not overweight, they look really healthy, they're active, and they get diabetes. Something is wrong. And so what we've done, the government's done over the years, again, they fought and saying nope. And again, after a number of the veterans died, after a number of children were born, high number of miscarriages and all these other ones, heart conditions, the whole works, they finally said, yes, there's an issue, and they created a pool of money to help pay for Agent Orange. And the VA said, these are preemptive conditions, and if you served an Agent Orange in these areas during this time, we will say that's a result of Agent Orange. So they went all this time of not giving anybody stuff because they said this group, because it could be self-induced. Now they went all the way to the other end and giving it to everybody who has prostate cancer, everybody who has diabetes, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Well, what they've said over and over again, only these people in this group during this time in these places will be getting credited for these illnesses being caused by Agent Orange. The government has said over and over and over again, Agent Orange has not been used any other place where the Americans have been served. Well, the reason I'm bringing this up, it's wrong, it's far and wrong, and there's thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands, possibly, of American veterans who've been subject to Agent Orange, and the government has refused to accept that. Well, so far, there'll be three, there's only three have been accepted. Here's from the Japanese Times. This was from April 2011. U.S. veteran fears toxins now beneath popular civilian area. This is by John Mitchell, special to the New York Times. Dozens of barrels of toxic defoliant Agent Orange were buried in the late 1960s beneath what is now a busy neighborhood in central Okinawa City, Chatan, near Araha Beach, according to a former U.S. soldier who recently pinpointed the location thanks to a 1970 map of a U.S. base obtained by the Japanese Times. The alleged burial took place in 1969 when the area was part of the U.S. Hamby airfield, but since returned to civilian use in 1981. The area has been developed into a sightseeing area. Nearby are restaurants, hotels, apartment buildings on streets running parallel to the beach. Recently, there have been several other claims concerning the burial of Agent Orange within U.S. military installations in Okinawa. But this is the first time a site has been identified on civilian land, which may pave the way for independent environmental tests to be conducted. And then the public wants dioxin testing in the hot spots. Last April, the Japanese Times published 3 U.S. veterans' accounts of the exposure to Okinawa. Since then, a further 30 former service members have spoken out about their experience of transporting, storage, spraying, and burying the defoliant over a dozen bases on the island. These claims have alarmed residents on Okinawa who are well aware of the Agent Orange toxic legacy in Vietnam. And so, Okinawa's concerns have focused on a number of occasions. According to a former U.S. military official interviewed by the Okinawa Times last year, defoliants were tested in the jungle near a village between 1960 and 1962. In 1963, the Pentagon apparently returned a patch of that land to civilian control. Even today, it lies barren. Nothing on it. Several U.S. veterans stationed on the base in early 1970 have claimed that large quantities of Agent Orange was stored at Swab and trucked to the northern jungles for war games, spraying within the base to kill weeds. The United States Department of Veterans Affairs has awarded 2 more former service members compensation for exposure to Agent Orange while serving on Okinawa during 1960 and 1970. An Army truck driver who came in contact with the toxin-tainted defoliant as he unloaded barrels in Naha Port in 1966 is receiving benefits for lung cancer attributed to his exposure. The second victim, a former Marine stationed on the island in the early 1970s, developed Hodgkin lymphoma and type 2 diabetes mellitus as a result of his work with contaminated military equipment shipped to Okinawa from the war in Vietnam, the VA ruled. Prior to the discovery of these 2 successful claims, it was widely believed that only 1 U.S. veteran has ever won compensation for exposure to Agent Orange in Okinawa. That 1998 VA ruling in the case of a soldier poisoned by the defoliant in the island's northern jungle caused consternation among former U.S. service members and Okinawa residents when it was reported in 2007. And so, basically, of all the people that have put claims, only 3, and the claim 1998, the VA made a ruling in the case of a soldier poisoned by Agent Orange. But no one knew about it until 2007. Again, that's 9 years. So think of all the Marines that cleaned off the equipment from Vietnam that went to Camp Swab, went to Camp Foster, Zucaran. They were cleaning it. It was covered with Agent Orange. The Army was offloading Agent Orange down in Naha. The VA knew about it. The VA kept it quiet. So I wonder how many people, how many men suffered, couldn't go to work, possibly died in poverty or died on Medicaid when the VA knew that they were exposed to it. The VA did not stand up and do what they were supposed to do. Wonder how many children were born with birth defects because of that 9 years. The VA did nothing. And so if you look at 1998, so if I go say 1980, so if 1980, that would mean I could be born in 1962, so I could be 46 years old. 46 years old in 1998. And if I was one of those guys on second marriage and decided I wanted to have more kids, I could have Agent Orange in my system and I'd be passing on that contamination to my child. How bad as a parent would I feel if the information was out there and I didn't know about that? It was just wrong, plain and simple wrong. I, for example, in Okinawa, was on Okinawa in 1981. Okay, that wasn't that very far long ago. But yeah, 1981 was long ago. The recent revealed VA claim regarding the Army truck driver exposed was decided in 2010. Okay, so the first one is in 1998. No one knew about it until 2007, and the next one was 2010. In his claim, the former soldier explained that he had served on the docks with the 44 Transportation Company between 1965 and 1969. We provide logistics support for the Republic of Vietnam war effort. Our mission was to unload large transport ships, such items as 55-gallon drums of herbicides, oil, solvents, and other materials. We handled the drums with loading and unloading, and often these drums leaked with contaminate on our hands and clothes. It is not known. The veteran's claim was supported by Buddy's statement by 5 fellow GIs corroborating his account of exposure to Agent Orange at Naha Port. In the judgment, the VA ruled that lung cancer associated with herbicide exposure substantiated by information and evidence in the VA procedure. Again, here it is. He had to go out and get 5 people to go and say, this is what happened. Okay? The case that involving the former Marine was decided in VA in September 2008. According to department documents, the service member worked in Okinawa, Japan on the Marine Corps base as a warehouse in 1972 to 1973. He alleges his unit, 3rd Service Battalion of the 3rd Marine Division, repaired equipment from the Combat Arms Battalion operating in Vietnam for repair and decontamination. And while the VA documents do not mention the specific installation where the exposure occurred, at the time the headquarters of the 3rd Marine Division was at Camp Courtney. I've been at Camp Courtney. I know what Camp Courtney is like. It's not a very good place, but it's Okinawa. Well, that was April of 2011. I've been in contact with John, who's been doing a great job on this. And I have a copy of the new article that went out, well, 2 days ago, Japanese time, an update on, in Japanese time, on Okinawa, Agent Orange in Okinawa, April 15th, 2012. Plain and simple, it's going is, the U.S. Department of Defense has once again been unable to find any evidence of Agent Orange on Okinawa. And the U.S. said there were no records, but there has been testimonies, and there were parts, and there were parts in U.S. response that needed firm confirmation. So again, the government is saying over and over and over again, there was no Agent Orange. Well, they cannot find, have been able to find any evidence of Agent Orange in Okinawa. Yes, we've got all these soldiers and Marines saying, yes, they had documentation that they're doing, but the government is saying, we can't find any records. And as long as the government says we can't find any records, the VA will not do anything because the VA says they're totally dependent on the federal government, Department of Defense, giving up those records. But people have been looking and looking and looking, and they're coming up with more. The Japanese Times ran their testimonies, and in August I present. Let's see. April Algo encouraged many other veterans to come forward with accounts of their use, storage, and loading of Agent Orange on bases, including Camp Swab, Kadena, and Fatima. And yes, I've been at Camp Swab, I've been at Kadena, and Fatima. And the unfortunate part maybe for me, but that will help these individuals. As a facilities maintenance officer, I was digging up, and I had to take hundreds of these drums out of the ground. And the best form, I didn't feel comfortable about it, but I took pictures of it, and I still have the pictures. I tried to go to the VA. The VA says, nope, they don't count because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They won't even test me for exposure. But now with the pictures, maybe we can help a lot of these men and women that have problems. I gave a press conference in Okinawa to update the Japanese language media on my latest research. I uncovered the use of defoliage on Iwo Island in 1973 and the storage of Agent Orange on Marine Corps Station Fatima. Plain and simple, I also introduced the 1966 Air Force documents which appear to controvert Pentagon's denial that the military herbicides were ever present on the island. The document was on the front page. But the federal government came back and says, the Pentagon has found U.S. veterans' testimonies of seeing Agent Orange usage on the base implausible during the following reasons. One, defoliants were never stored along other chemicals. Barrels of defoliant were always clearly marked as such. Dr. Wayne, I can't even pronounce his name, a well-known denoxin expert who researched the impact of Agent Orange in Vietnam for more than 15 years, dismissed the statement as ludicrous. I do not know how the officials can say this. If space was limited, of course Agent Orange was stored next to other chemicals. As for the claims that all barrels were marked, some of them only had very minimal markings. And so there's again, and so anybody who's interested in it, you can go to Google, Agent Orange use on Okinawa. Go to Japanese Times. There's a number of really important articles. And this is going worldwide. It's going into a number of places around the United States. And the only way that we're going to be able to help the soldiers and the sailors and the Marine and the Air Force people that served on these bases in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s is for as many veterans as possible who served there, who have information, who have photos, to start collecting, to get together. Whether you go to the American Legion or the VFW and you go and say, this is wrong, this is the information that I have, or you go to the Japanese Times, you will be able to email, get his name, John Mitchell, and he's collecting the information, and he will be able to provide you as much information as possible. He will be able to provide you contacts and service organizations and individuals in the United States that can help you research, can help you look at this and say, should I file a claim? Do I have a reasonable probability that something was wrong? And it's really important. There is really important, because if there is something wrong and you can prove it and you can file the claim with the VA, it could mean the difference of a slow, painful death, or it can mean the difference of good medical treatment and getting funds so you can spend the rest of your life with dignity. Lung cancer is expensive, and prostate cancer is expensive. Diabetes is expensive. And some of these things will prevent you from holding a full-time job. It's not your fault, but the idea is if you know, or if you have a loved one that may have passed on, or you may have your wife or a spouse of a veteran or a son or daughter of a veteran, get with him and get with her and say, Dad, say, Mom, something just isn't right here, and contact your local service officer again, or contact the Japanese Times and look for Mr. Mitchell. It's really important. Do not become a number. Do not die off before the government thinks it's financially acceptable to start taking care of you. So, again, I will see you there out on the long road, and let's make sure we help as many people as possible, as many veterans as possible who served in Okinawa. They deserve our help, and thank you.